Deep within the ancient nebula known as the Veil of Ages, where reality blurred with dreams and eternity coiled upon itself, the elder gods convened. Their forms shimmered as multicolored smoke, fractals folding infinitely inwards, voices resonating like the hum of galaxies, a lattice of time and space that allowed them to observe the mortal realms. Epharion, the youngest and boldest among the elder gods, spoke first. "Why must we remain silent while these creatures roam the void? Surely they are of no consequence to beings such as we. Their lives are brief sparks against the canvas of eternity." From the infinite depths of the Nexus, an image formed. A world surrounded by a golden sun and a pale satellite, brimming with teeming, fragile life. It was Earth. The elder gods turned their attention to it, their formless eyes glowing with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The eldest among them, Azareth, spoke in a voice that carried the weight of collapsing stars. "Beware, Epharion. You have not witnessed the potential of humankind. Their path is chaos incarnate, a paradox of creation and destruction. Even now, they inch toward forces they do not comprehend." Wait. Epharion's essence flickered with amusement. Surely such diminutive beings could pose no threat to us. The Nexus rippled, showing the rise of human civilization. Primitive tools gave way to gleaming cities and humming machines. Yet alongside their ingenuity there was destruction, wars that scarred the planet, weapons that could annihilate continents, and experiments that probed the very fabric of reality. The elder gods fell silent, their formless shapes trembling as they recalled an ancient warning etched into the fabric of the universe. Beware the species that questions the void. The Veil of Ages thrummed with an unsettling resonance as the Nexus revealed scenes of human ambition and folly. Azoreth shifted closer to the crystalline lattice, his vast form casting shadows upon the younger gods. "Epharion," he said, his tone grave, "look beyond their frailty. Their brief lives are like sparks, yes, but sparks can ignite conflagrations." The Nexus shifted, showing a scene from centuries ago. A solitary figure, draped in primitive robes, stood atop a windswept mountain. The human gazed at the stars, his eyes alight with questions no other creature on his world had dared to ask. The elder gods remembered this human, as they remembered all who turned their gaze upward and sought answers. "They seek," murmured one of the gods, a whispering entity named Micthara. "Always they seek. The answers are irrelevant to them. It is the seeking itself that drives them." Epharion's form coiled and flickered, still unconvinced. A virtue, perhaps, but also a weakness. They dig too deeply, fly too high, reach too far. Such arrogance invites ruin. "Arrogance, yes," Azareth agreed, "but also courage. Observe them closely, Epharion. Watch their determination." The Nexus swirled, fast-forwarding through the epochs of human history. Images of wars and triumphs, discoveries and disasters, flickered in rapid succession. The gods watched as humans tamed fire, forged tools, and charted the stars. They marveled at the audacity of creatures who dared to dream beyond their fragile world. But then the scene darkened. The Nexus displayed a massive machine, a spire of steel and glass surrounded by fields of antennas and glowing conduits. Humans in lab coats worked feverishly around it, their faces lit with a mixture of hope and trepidation. This was the Singularity Engine, a device built to pierce the veil between dimensions. Epharion's essence stilled. "What is this?" "Their latest creation," Azareth said. "They call it the Singularity Engine. It is meant to open gateways to other realms, to us." The younger god recoiled, his light flickering with unease. They dare to breach our domain? They do not know what they reach for, Micthara said. And that is why they are dangerous. Their ignorance is matched only by their resolve. The Nexus zoomed in on the human scientists. Their leader, a woman named Dr. Eleanor Voss, stood at the center of the room, her eyes fixed on the glowing device. She spoke to her team, her voice steady despite the enormity of their task. "Today, we step into the unknown," she said. "We've come so far, not because we were unafraid, but because we refuse to let fear hold us back. This machine represents everything humanity stands for: curiosity, ambition, and the willingness to risk everything for knowledge." Her words echoed in the chamber, resonating with an unshakable conviction. The elder gods observed in silence, their forms flickering with an unsettling tension. "Hanker! Hanker!" "She speaks as though she understands the void," Iferion muttered. "But she does not. None of them do." "Oh." The paladin's gaze dropped to the dead man, waiting for the rest of the gossip. Something like cold shudder joined Eferion's mother. Ezerith's tone grew darker. "And that ignorance is what makes them formidable. They do not fear the unknown, they challenge it." The singularity engine roared to life. Streams of light arced through the laboratory, bending space and time. The scientists cheered, their voices rising in triumph. But the elder gods saw what the humans could not. The ripples spreading across the void, reaching toward realms beyond comprehension. "It hath begun," Micthara whispered. Iferion's form pulsed with agitation. "We must intervene. If they continue, they will unravel more than they can imagine." "Patience," Azorith commanded. "We will watch. We will see how far they dare to go." The desperate popularity of patience gains credence. Say, "Search, what do we possibly know about species exiles?" The elder gods turned their gaze back to the humans, their forms shimmering with a mixture of dread and anticipation. They had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, but none quite like this. The humans were different. They were unpredictable, and they were not afraid of the void. Hours. The gods watched as the humans celebrated their achievement. The singularity engine continued to hum, its power growing with each passing moment. The scientists began to gather data, unaware of the shadows pooling at the edges of their reality. To the elder gods, those shadows were a warning sign, a reminder of what had happened before. Ezerith's mind drifted to an ancient memory. Long before humanity's rise, another race had dared to pierce the veil. The Celestari, beings of immense intellect and ambition, had created their own dimensional gateway. They had reached out to the elder gods, seeking knowledge and power. Margaret had been one of them, and she'd spent years of computer analysis long before she could join the people. The elder gods had answered, granting the Celestari a fragment of their wisdom, but the gift had proven too much for the mortals to bear. Their world had descended into chaos, consumed by madness and destruction. The elder gods had been forced to seal the gateway, cutting off the Celestari from their realm. "This is how it begins," Azerith said, his voice heavy with the weight of millennia. "They seek answers, but they are not ready for the truth. The void is not kind to those who seek it unprepared." The tense response that followed made the already tight corridors echo in conformity. Eferion's form flickered with impatience. "Then why do we not stop them? Why do we allow them to continue? Why do we allow them to represent the whole Iolist in this tragedy?" "Because they must choose their own path," Azerith replied. "Interference would only hasten their demise. We will watch and wait. If they reach too far, they will find only emptiness, and if they persist... He trailed off, the weight of his unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. The Nexus continued to display the human's progress. The Singularity engine grew brighter, its power reaching levels the scientists had not anticipated. The Elder Gods felt the ripples spreading further, touching realms that had been silent for eons. The void began to stir. For the first time in millennia, the Elder Gods felt a twinge of uncertainty. Humanity had crossed a threshold, and there was no turning back. The discovery had been made, and the path ahead was shrouded in shadow. The laboratory hummed with activity as the Singularity engine neared completion. The air was thick with anticipation, tension, and the faint tang of ozone from the powerful electromagnetic fields emanating from the device. For Dr. Eleanor Voss, the project's lead scientist, it was the culmination of years of relentless work, sleepless nights, and defiance against skeptics who had called her vision mad. The engine stood in the center of the room, an intricate lattice of superconductive metals and crystalline nodes glowing faintly with energy. Around it, her team worked tirelessly, their movements synchronized like a well-rehearsed dance. To them, the Singularity engine was more than a machine. It was humanity's chance to transcend its limitations, to pierce the veil of the unknown and take its rightful place among the stars. Dr. Voss paced the perimeter of the room, her sharp eyes scanning the monitors that displayed streams of data. The readings were stable, the energy levels within acceptable parameters. Yet she felt a gnawing unease at the back of her mind. The machine's complexity was such that even she, its chief architect, could only grasp fragments of what it truly represented. It was as if they were standing on the edge of a vast chasm, peering into a void that defied comprehension. "Eleanor," came a voice from her left. It was Dr. Raj Patel, her second in command. He held a tablet in one hand, his expression a mixture of excitement and concern. "The energy output is fluctuating slightly, nothing outside the safety margins, but it's enough to make you nervous," Eleanor finished for him, offering a small, tight smile. "I've seen the same data. The engine is self-correcting, as it's designed to do. We've accounted for every variable we could predict." Raj hesitated, then nodded. "I know. But this is uncharted territory. There's no precedent for what we're doing here." "That's exactly why we're doing it," Eleanor replied, her voice firm. "Humanity has always thrived in the face of the unknown. This is no different." Raj opened his mouth to respond, but a sudden spike in activity on the monitors drew both their attention. A low hum filled the room, growing in intensity as the Singularity engine powered up. The crystalline nodes flared brighter, their glow shifting through a spectrum of colors that seemed almost alien in their vibrancy. The team sprang into action, calling out readings and adjustments as the machine reached critical levels. Eleanor's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the energy patterns stabilize, forming intricate, swirling geometries that danced across the monitors. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. "We're approaching dimensional resonance," called out one of the technicians. "Projected gateway stabilization in 3 minutes." Eleanor stepped closer to the central console, her fingers flying over the controls as she monitored the engine's progress. This was the moment they had been working toward, the moment when theory would become reality. And yet, as the hum deepened into a resonant thrumming that seemed to vibrate in her very bones, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of something far greater and far more dangerous than they had anticipated. In the Veil of Ages, the Elder Gods observed with growing unease. The crystal nexus that connected their collective consciousness shimmered with images of the human laboratory, the Singularity engine at its heart. Epherion's essence pulsed with agitation as he watched the mortals inch closer to opening the gateway. "They do not know what they are about to unleash," he said, his voice a ripple of light and sound. "We must intervene before it is too late." "And what would you do, Epharion?" Azoreth replied, his tone heavy with the weight of millennia. "Strike them down? Destroy their creation? Such actions would only hasten their curiosity. The humans are like fire. The more you try to extinguish them, the more they spread." Epharion's form flickered with frustration. "Then what do you propose? Shall we simply watch as they tear apart the fabric of reality?" "They will learn," Azoreth said, his gaze fixed on the glowing nexus, "either through success or through suffering." The image in the nexus shifted, revealing a distant memory, a world consumed by chaos, its skies torn asunder, and its inhabitants driven mad by knowledge they were never meant to possess. The Celestari. Epharion recoiled at the sight, his essence dimming with unease, thing that had fallen into despair. Things might get worse before they got better. This summer of love and cyber weather, Carrot had been surprised. "They are not the Celestari," Azoreth continued. "The humans are different. Reckless, yes, but also resourceful. If they survive, they may yet prove to be our greatest allies, or our greatest threat." Back in the laboratory, the Singularity engine reached full power. The air crackled with energy, the lights dimming as the machine drew more power than the facility could comfortably provide. The crystalline nodes flared with blinding brilliance, and a tear began to form in the center of the device, a shimmering oval-shaped rift that pulsed with an otherworldly light. Eleanor stared at the rift, her breath catching in her throat. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, a swirling maelstrom of colors and shapes that seemed to defy the very laws of physics. She felt both exhilarated and terrified, as if standing on the precipice of a vast and unknowable abyss. "We have gateway stabilization," one of the technicians announced, his voice tinged with awe. "The dimensional breach is holding steady." "What are the readings on the other side?" Eleanor asked, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand. "We're detecting something," another technician replied, his brow furrowing as he studied the data. "Energy signatures unlike anything in our database. It's alive." The room fell silent as the implications of his words sank in. Alive. The rift wasn't just a window into another dimension. It was a doorway, and something on the other side was aware of them. Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. She stepped closer to the console, her eyes locked on the rift. For a moment, she thought she saw shapes moving within it, shadows that shifted and writhed like living things. Her rational mind told her it was a trick of the light, an artifact of the energy patterns. But deep down, she knew better. "Dr. Voss," Raj said, his voice low, "we need to consider shutting it down. We don't know what we're dealing with here." "No," Eleanor said firmly, shaking her head. "This is what we came here for. We can't turn back now." Raj looked as if he wanted to argue, but before he could speak, the rift pulsed violently. The lights flickered, and the hum of the machine rose to a deafening roar. Alarms blared as the energy levels spiked, pushing the system to its limits. "We're losing stability," a technician shouted. "The gateway, it's changing. Stop." The rift expanded, its edges crackling with arcs of energy that lashed out like tendrils. The shadows within it grew more defined, coalescing into shapes that were almost but not quite human. Eleanor felt her heart race as one of the shapes stepped closer to the edge of the rift, its form shimmering with an otherworldly light. "It sees us," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the chaos. The Terran space swirled with a kaleidoscope of impossible colors, stretching wider as energy surged through the Singularity engine. Shadows writhed within the rift, forming shapes that danced just at the edge of comprehension. The laboratory was bathed in an eerie glow, the air thick with the hum of distorted frequencies. The boundary between the known and the unknown had been breached, and humanity stood on the brink of revelation. To see. Dr. Eleanor Voss's voice rang out over the chaos. Stabilize the energy flow. Increase the damping field. Technicians scrambled to their stations, their faces pale but determined. Lines of code flashed across monitors, charts spiked and dipped, and alarms screamed in warning. Eleanor's mind raced as she analyzed the data. The gateway was holding, but only barely. The rift pulsed as though it were alive, and its expansions came faster and with more force. Raj, Eleanor called, turning to her second in command. What's the status on the dimensional harmonics? Who over his keyboard? Raj Patel's fingers flew over his keyboard. They're fluctuating rapidly. The rift, it's resonating with frequencies we've never encountered before. It's almost like it's tuning itself. Tuning to what? Eleanor demanded, though she feared she already knew the answer. Raj hesitated, his brow furrowed in concentration. It's reaching out, trying to synchronize with something. Or someone. Eleanor's stomach twisted. The shapes within the rift grew clearer, their forms shimmering with an unnatural light. They moved with purpose now, as if aware of the humans watching them. She could feel their gaze, a cold, piercing sensation that sent shivers down her spine. These beings were not merely observing, they were responding. In the Veil of Ages, the elder gods watched the unfolding drama with a mixture of fascination and dread. The crystalline nexus pulsed as it projected the images of the human laboratory, the glowing rift at its center. Mixthara, the whispering entity, rippled with unease. They have opened the door, Mixthara said, her voice like wind rustling through an ancient forest. And what lies beyond will not be so easily sent back. Epharaion's essence blazed with frustration. Then why do we still wait? We should intervene now, before their recklessness brings ruin upon us all. Azarith, ever the calm center of their collective, spoke with deliberate weight. We are bound by the laws of our existence. To act without necessity is to disrupt the balance. Let us see if they can control what they have summoned. And if they cannot, Epharion challenged. Azarith turned his gaze back to the nexus, his form dimming slightly. Then they will learn. Through triumph or annihilation, they will learn. The first signs of instability came as a sudden jolt through the facility. The ground trembled, equipment rattling on its mounts. Sparks flew from the crystalline nodes of the Singularity engine as it struggled to contain the immense energy pouring through the gateway. Eleanor gripped the edge of a console to steady herself. Kadox thumbed slowly, signaling the approaching gateway, forcing Eleanor to her feet. What the hell was that? One of the technicians shouted. Localized seismic activity, Raj said, his voice tight. The rift's energy output is interacting with the Earth's crust. It's destabilizing more than just the dimensional barrier. And Eleanor's mind raced. This was beyond what they had planned for, beyond what their models had predicted. She could feel the weight of every decision she'd made pressing down on her, every calculation, every risk she'd taken to get them here. For the first time, she wondered if she'd gone too far. We need to shut it down, Raj said urgently, now, before it's too late. No, Eleanor said, though her voice wavered. Not yet. We haven't seen what's on the other side. If we close it now, we may never get another chance. Raj stared at her, his expression a mix of disbelief and anger. Eleanor, this isn't just about discovery anymore, this is about survival. If that thing gets out. Nothing has come through yet, Eleanor interrupted. We still have control. But even as she said the words, she knew they rang hollow. The rift pulsed again, and this time the shapes within it grew sharper, more distinct. They were no longer merely shadows. They were beings, their forms vast and incomprehensible, yet somehow familiar. And they were reaching out. One of the technicians let out a strangled cry as a tendril of light emerged from the rift, curling and twisting like a living thing. It moved with an unsettling grace, probing the air as if searching for something. The team froze, their eyes wide with terror. "What is that?" someone whispered. "It's..." Eleanor forced herself to move, to think. "Everyone stay calm. It hasn't breached containment. As long as the field holds, we're safe. If people..." But even as she spoke, the tendril touched the edge of the containment field. There was a flash of light, and the air filled with a sharp, crackling sound. The field shuddered, ripples of energy spreading across its surface. The tendril recoiled, but only for a moment. Then it struck again, harder this time, and the field flickered. "Field integrity is failing," a technician shouted. "We can't hold it much longer." Eleanor's mind raced. The singularity engine was their only chance to contain the rift, but it was also the source of its power. Shutting it down would close the gateway, but it might also unleash the full force of the dimensional breach. "Eleanor, we need a decision," Raj shouted. She looked at the rift, at the beings on the other side. They were watching her, she realized. Waiting. For what, she couldn't say, but she could feel their presence, their vast, unfathomable minds brushing against her own. They were ancient, powerful, and utterly alien, and yet there was something familiar about them, something that made her hesitate. "No," she said at last, "we're not shutting it down, not yet." In the veil of ages the elder gods stirred. Epharion's essence flared with anger. "She defies reason. She will doom them all." "Perhaps," Azorith said, his tone contemplative. "Or perhaps she sees something we do not. Watch closely, Epharion. This moment will define their fate." The nexus showed the human laboratory, the rift glowing brighter with each passing second. The beings within it moved closer, their forms more defined now. They were not mere shadows, nor were they entirely physical. They were something in between, something that defied classification. And they were reaching out. In the laboratory, the tendril of light struck the containment field again. This time the field collapsed. The air filled with a deafening roar as the rift surged outward, its edges expanding rapidly. Equipment was torn from its mounts, sparks flying as consoles exploded. The team scrambled for cover, their cries of panic lost in the chaos. Eleanor stood frozen, her eyes locked on the rift. One of the beings stepped through, its form shimmering with an otherworldly light. It was massive, its shape constantly shifting, its presence overwhelming. Yet as it moved toward her, she felt no fear. Only awe, an exultation. The being paused, its gaze, if it could be called that, focused on her. And then it spoke, not in words, but in a cascade of thoughts and images that flooded her mind.